Hi, readers. I'm back. I just had to share the Big Orange Splot with you. After I read it yesterday, I was thinking about how the character in this story experiences something that I think all of us do. Have you ever had a time when you wanted to do something a little bit different from your friends? And maybe you felt scared because it wasn't what everyone else was doing. Or maybe you felt really brave and said, nope, I'm going to do that anyway because that's who I am and that's what I want to do. Either way is okay. But the character in this story, he has that kind of experience where he has to decide, is he going to be true to himself or is he going to go along with what everyone else is doing? So I'm going to read The Big Orange Splot by Daniel Pinkwater. Now I know you're probably feeling pretty sad that you're not sitting on the floor right in front of me checking out my toenail polish. So I wore my most distracting earrings for you. I hope you can pay attention to the book. The Big Orange Splot. Daniel Pinkwater. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped the can. No one knows why. Right over Mr. Plumbean's house. Uh-oh. Check that out. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Ooh, too bad, everybody said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at that big orange splot for a long time. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange splot, and someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish that you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. He was a pretty nice neighbor. So he got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. That reminds me of Thailand. I think I would paint my house at night too if I was going to do that here. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange splot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same, but Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. Wonder how the neighbors are going to feel. Look at his house. There was the big orange splot, and there were little orange splots. There were stripes. There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools, and that night he built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. The next day the people said, Plumbean has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, slipped his hawser. They decided they would pretend not to notice what he had done to his house. That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams. Mr. Plumbean was very happy. The people went away and asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to have a talk with him. Tell him that we liked it before he changed his house. Tell him his house has to be the same as ours so we can have a neat street. What do you think Mr. Plumbean should do? Here's the neighbor who went to talk to Mr. Plumbean that night. They sat together under the palm trees. They drank lemonade and they talked all night long. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope, nails and paint. And when the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. Can you tell what the neighbor's dreams are? What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, said the man, who had always loved ships. He's just like Plumbean, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, knots in his noodle. Then, one by one, they all went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing his own house to fit his dreams. Would you like to see some of their dream houses? Maybe you'll see one that looks like your dream house. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, that stranger would say, "Oh, this is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us, and we are it. Our street is where we like to be, and it looks like all our dreams." All because Mr. Plumbean was brave. Wow, I can't wait to talk to Zuzu and Maxwell about their dream house. I wonder what it would look like. I want you to find someone that you can talk to about this book also. You could tell someone what your dream house would look like, or you might want to talk about what you would have done if you were Mr. Plumbean. Do you think that it would be hard for you to follow your dreams and do something different? Or is that easy for you to do what you want and be who you are? It's a tricky thing sometimes. After you're done talking to someone, I want you to find some good books to read, maybe ones you put in your hands, or you might be reading on a laptop or an iPad, and read independently for 10 more minutes. Then put all your technology away and have an awesome, relaxing weekend. See you, kindergarten.